All right, we are just about ready to begin. Push a few buttons and we will be ready to go. Well, we've had a break away from our main topic for several months while we were doing questions and answers. And I think the questions and answers are very important, but I don't want them to become the class completely. So now we need to get back to what we were doing before. And for that, a review is in order. So this evening we will do a brief review. Now this is part of a general system, a series of talks called Modern Mysticism. And it basically is a survey of modern Western mysticism using the terms that I know best, and it's not mysticism as an end in itself. It is mysticism to show how mystics perceive reality. A philosophy is only good in as far as it helps us to experience reality better, to understand it, and work with reality better. Now, in this series called Modern Mysticism, there have been sub-series. And the very first sub-series was called Spiritual Cosmography. It was about the spiritual worlds. We spent several years doing that. And then we had the second sub-series, which was called Spiritual Cosmology. And cosmology is about how things are done, how things are brought about. And we discussed that, and we discussed cycles a lot because the cycle is one of the engines of accomplishment in the creation. Now we are in the third sub-series, and the third sub-series is called Spiritual Cosmogony. It is about creation. It is about the solar manifestation, which was well before there was even a sun. We say solar because it involves the system that we're involved in now, but that system existed before there was a solar system with planets and things like that. Now, in talking about this is obviously an extremely large subject. So what we have done is we're looking at the creation primarily from the point of view of the people or of the beings that are now our humanity. Such spiritual beings or becoming spiritual beings are sometimes called life waves, sometimes they're called creative waves, sometimes they're called evolutionary waves. So our wave is the wave of humanity. Now, from our point of view, the creation is in two major phases, which are called involution and evolution. Involution is becoming involved in matter, and evolution is becoming evolved out of matter. Now, during involution, we and the cosmos were involved with concretizing from more spiritual states down to the current highly dense material or concrete state that we now live in. Now, the activity of the creation can be understood on several levels. We're looking at it in terms of microcosm and macrocosm. The microcosm being us, the life wave that is humans, and the macrocosm being the whole business. Now, in macrocosm, the cosmos was passing from worlds that were purely spiritual down to the most concrete material worlds of all. Now, in microcosm, again from the human point of view, we were paralleling that, or we were going through that, but we were developing bodies related to those worlds, so that when the world was formed, we used that experience of that world to develop a vehicle to carry out the creation and to get full experience out of it. That's a big part of our work, is experiencing things and sharing our experience with the whole. Now, according to mysticism, the whole creation takes place in 7 great periods of time. The length of those periods of time, I don't think we can begin to put them in terms of years or anything like that. Now, 3.5 of the periods were involutionary. They were involved with greater and greater concretion, and the last 3.5 are evolved with ascending out of matter. They are evolutionary. Now, the periods have planetary names, but they are not the planets. In things like cosmology or cosmography or cosmogony, planets represent qualities. Now, we say that there is a Saturnine quality that is now focused in the planet Saturn, but there was a Saturnine quality before there was a planet Saturn. It is to say that these spiritual qualities that are given planetary names existed before there were planets which were concretizations of these qualities. Now, these great periods of time, the first is called the Saturn period. The second is called the Sun period. The third is called the Moon period. And the fourth period is called the Earth period, but that doesn't mean our planet Earth only. And the fourth period is broken in half. The involutionary half of the Earth period is called the Mars half. And the evolutionary, as we're coming out of matter, is called the Mercury half of the Earth period. And the final periods are the Jupiter period, the Venus period, and the Vulcan period. Now, the creation, in which we are very blessed to participate, is just past the middle of the Earth period. We are already ascending out of matter. A very little bit, but it is where we are at. So we can say that everything is on an upward trend. But because everything is cyclical, we're going to have to go back into matter again, maybe not this deep, but you cycle again and again, and you spiral into matter and you spiral out of matter. Now, in each of the 7 periods, there are formed 7 globular formations, and they are composed of the stuff of the cosmos during that period. Now, in a very uncreative way, the globes are called globe A, globe B, globe C, globe D, globe E, globe F, and globe G. That is done to make it as simple as possible. In reality, because everything is analogous, it should be the Saturn globe, the Sun globe, the Moon globe, the Earth globe, the Jupiter globe, the Venus globe, and the Vulcan globe. But that would be confusing to many people, even if one goes at it very, very carefully. Now, the globular formations are made out of the stuff they are formed from. Right now, the globular formation is in the chemical subdivision of the physical world, because that's what is manifest right now. Now, the bodies of all the evolving entities, whether they're creators or whether they're creatures, are composed of the stuff of the worlds that we're working through. Now, the stuff of the formations is what our bodies are composed of. For example, we are currently in the 4th globe of the Earth period. Now, that 4th globe is not just the Earth, it's the entire solar system. That is the 4th globe. In fact, that 4th globe is itself condensing, because there were times when the 4th globe didn't reach as deeply into matter as it does now. Now, all of the beings participating in the creation collectively form a focus of consciousness, and that is associated with the globes, but it is not the globes themselves. Just imagine a globe or a focus of consciousness, and that focus of consciousness is like a ball of light, and that ball of light passes through these globular formations, and it descends and ascends in order. But the descent is outward rather than inward, and it is outward into greater concretion rather than to inward expansion of spiritual consciousness. Now, this passing through the globes, as the globes form and deform, this happens 7 times. So there is this wave of consciousness, this ball of light, that no matter what the substance is that it's working through, is passing through these globes as they form and unform. In this, it's helpful to remember who we are or what we are. We are the spirit that is conscious, but we focus in our bodies. And the spirit is like the light, and the opaque bodies that we have are like the globular formations. That's the way it is in microcosm. So the collective consciousness of all the spirits is with the globular formation of the forms and the worlds in which those forms are made. All right, we just want to make sure that that we are clear about that. So that ball of consciousness is made up of all of the beings that are participating. Now, the thing is that some of the beings in some of their states of being are interpenetrating other beings. Like interpenetrating us is the consciousness of the solar system. Whether we realize it or not, we are interpenetrated all of the time. All right. Let me. All right. The world as it is now, as it is manifested in a chemical subdivision of the physical world, is the objective, the material objective of the creation. It is not the only objective, because there are spiritual objectives and there are others along the way. But the ultimate material objective is to be in the physical world. Now, this is as far as we or our solar cosmos will pass into concretion. It's as dense as we are going to be in matter. Now, this is important because what we are now in our physical existence, which is how we interact with the world as it is now, it was part of the creative intent all along, that the divine creative plan that we're trying to discuss and trying to elucidate had this objective all along. And therefore our bodies have been evolved from the very beginning, ab ovo or ab initio, from the very, very start of things. Okay, now this is the first introduction to form. We've looked at the form of the periods of time and the globes of matter or form that are within the periods of time, and the revolution of consciousness that passes through the globes in the worlds in the periods of time. All right, now we're going to go all over again and do the same thing all over. Now, what is of critical importance at this time, which is the material objective, is our dense physical body. It's what we see when we look in the mirror. We see this object. Now, for most people who live in the materialistic illusion, it is the entirety of our existence. Now, the physical body is really important, but it is not the entirety of our existence. Now, this body, in various different forms, has been developed from the very beginning. And it was planned to be what it is now, roughly. In creation, you always have to adapt to circumstances. You always have to adapt to the conditions that prevail. But I don't want to get into that. It's too much. All right. In the first creative period, which is called the Saturn period, the creation at its greatest concrete state was as dense as a concrete thought. At that time, what is our body now had no form. It had to be able to take on a form, any kind of form. And since the sphere is the most efficient form, simplest to make in space, we had to have a pinpoint spherical form, you might say, an atom of being, and we had to be able to take on that form and hold it. Now, in mysticism, we call our state of evolution in the Saturn period, it is called a mineral-like existence. The minerals aren't anything like our current minerals. Our current minerals are quite elaborate. We weren't like sulfur or phosphorus or something like that. We were just a thought mineral. And the thought of being able to take a form and to hold that form. So, our forms were projected or into being by divine beings. The Bible calls them the Elohim. Some people call them the creative hierarchies. Some people call them the ancestors, or all kinds of different names. Now, from the very beginning, there was a microcosm within the microcosm, meaning to say the body was a microcosm of what was happening in the entire globular experience. But within the globular body that we as individuals were developing, there was a thought potential for being able to experience the external world. That's why we are in this world right now. We're here to experience things, and in order to be able to experience something outside of ourselves, we have to have means to do that. And the means that we do that with our senses. So the sense, the germ of initial sense perception was with the physical body in the Saturn period. It wasn't eyes because there was no light at that time, but if you remember going all the way back to the spiritual cosmography talks that we did, that the world of thought, everything is a world of pitch, or it is a world of tone. And so the first sense that was planted in us was the ability to recognize pitch or tone, which now has evolved to become the sense of hearing. All right, so there was no light then. In the next great period, and in between these periods, there are cosmic rests. And in those rests, everything is assimilated. It's very much like what happens in the nights between every day. Between every day, when we go to sleep at night, we assimilate the experience. That is, if we have a healthy psychology, we assimilate it. If we don't, and if we're still too attached to this physical world, we have dreams and we're still trying to work out the things of this world, even when we're not really in it. Now, the sun period was filled with light. It's not like the light that we have now from the sun. There wasn't even a sun at that time. The whole creation was a mass of light, but it was not like sunlight that we see by reflection. It was light that didn't emanate from a specific source. It emanated from everywhere in space. That's the way things are in the spiritual world. Light is, the sun is everywhere, you might say. So the whole creation was light. Now, we at that time passed through a plant-like existence. We weren't plants, but we were something analogous to plants. We weren't nearly as sophisticated as our plants are now, because as evolution goes on, the beings that do the evolutionary work, they get better. So the different creatures going through the different stages of plant-like, mineral-like, or animal-like, the guiders or the creators themselves are getting better. That's what evolution is. Everything gets better and better. The relationship we have now is the relationship of sunlight to plants. Plants need light, and they get that light from the sun. we had the same thing with the sun that was everywhere at the same time. And the purpose was to have a body that could live. Remember, it's trying to bring us to our present state. In our present state, we're not like stones. We live. We have a body that can heal, it can grow, it changes shape, and that is dependent on having this body interpenetrated with something that gives it the ability to live, grow, and feel. So we developed what some mystics call a vital body. Some people just call it the straight etheric body. And that was our work in the plant-like existence. But since it's interpenetrating, it couldn't be of the same stuff as the becoming physical bodies. The physical bodies and the solar cosmos were in the desire world in the sun period. And therefore, the evolving etheric or vital body had to be more rare than desire. And what was that? Thought. So all of our vehicles we're going to see began as thought forms, or they began in the world of thought. So the thought of vitality was what gave us our plant-like existence in the sun period. That was our work at that time. Again, this is all preparing us to be as we are now. Now, this was the work of the sun period. Again, there's a great rest and a great assimilation and distribution of the essence of experience. And after that rest, the cosmos came out again. And when it came out again, it was called the moon period. And this time, the whole of the creation moved another level deeper. And so the most dense of all of the globes, that globe D, that is always the most dense globe, the most dense it became was the etheric subdivision of the physical world. Again, we went through another stage. And in the moon period, let's bring in something new altogether. Each period introduces a creative element. And a creative element is not the same thing as an atomic element. It's not the same as helium or iron or something like that. It is an element that represents a means of creation. Now, in the Saturn period, everything was heat. It was before the whole solar system, or what was to become the solar system, became aglow with astral light. So the element of the Saturn period was fire. And in a lot of mythologies, Saturn as a divinity is associated with fire. For example, Loki in the Norse mythology is associated with fire. In the sun period, a new element was added, and it was an element called air. But that is not like the gaseous air that we're talking about now. It was an air that is more like what we say somebody is an illumined person. So it was an air that was made of illumination. And that illumination was the astral light that lighted the whole of things. Now the new element that came in with the moon period was water. That doesn't mean H2O. That means a creative element that fosters, that protects, that brings material life into form. And that was what was added in the moon period. So, the cosmos in the moon period was as deep as the ethers. No deeper than the ethers. So in Globe D, in the fourth revolution of Globe D, when we were the most material of all, it was no more dense than what scientists would call a magnetic field. That, doesn't mean there was evolution that took place. There was less resistance to evolution, but it was, evolution takes place in various states of being. If you get nothing else out of this review but that's an important thing to have gotten. So, a new vehicle was necessary in the moon period. In the moon period, we went through an animal-like existence. Now, in form, we didn't look anything like our animals now. In fact, we weren't even as autonomous as our animals are now. We sort of had an umbilical-like type of existence. But with the autonomy that we had, there had to be a motivation to do something. If we look at our current animals, the animals are motile. And most often, the world being what it is now, they are either prey or predator. So you have to be motile to escape a predator, or you have to be motile to be a predator to chase the prey. And so that ability to have motivation to change, it isn't just a matter of a form. The form is developed to a greater purpose, and the greater purpose is to have motivation. We as human beings, some people like to vegetate, and they would just as soon be couch potatoes, so to speak, and lie in a form and not do anything. But obviously, it's important to have action, to experience. Vitality is not enough alone. Vitality has to lead to a kind of experience that is more thoroughgoing, and that involves change, and change involves motivation. You have to want to change, and the cosmos provides that for us. So, we developed what is now called a desire body or an astral body. And this was to interpenetrate the physical body and the vital body, or the vital body, or the body of life, or vital life. In order to interpenetrate, it had to be more subtle. Now, if the physical body was as dense as the ethers, and the etheric body was as dense as the desire world, in order to be more subtle, the new desire body had to be in the world of thought. And that is a general creative principle in our solar manifestation. All new creation that comes from divinity, whether it is us as an individual, or whether it is the gods, or whether it is the universal spirit itself, when it comes into concrete manifestation, everything begins with a concrete thought. The thought becomes a desire, the desire becomes an action, or a vital living thing, and the action precipitates, the vitality precipitates a physical body. That's how we come to birth. If you remember, when we talked about spiritual cosmology, we talked about the birth cycle and how we come to rebirth again and again. Now, that is basically what we did in the moon period. Now finally we come to the Earth period. We're only in the center of the Earth period. Actually, we are just a little bit past the center of the Earth period. Specifically, we are in the fourth revolution on the fourth globe of the Earth period. And we're just past the center of density. And so we're beginning to move out of physical existence and into the higher worlds. In fact, that's going to occupy us for quite a while now. Now, we said earlier that Globe D, as it is now, is the solar system. But even in the Earth period, the solar system didn't exist at all until very recently. In the first revolutions, the first three revolutions, it was only in the higher worlds. It was only in recently that the solar system condensed as it is now, with the planets forming out of the whole of what there was once the ball of fire or energy. The planets condensed, and finally that allowed the center to become a sun. Now, that's a very recent thing. So what the scientists, the material scientists, claim that this happened about the age of the solar system is about 4.5 billion years. And that roughly corresponds to what mysticism says also. So, what we're talking about, during the earlier revolutions and the earlier globes, this didn't exist like this. But now we have come to the point where we are in a physical Earth. And we went through, as we have seen in previous talks, we went through all kinds of bodies to come to our current body. If you remember those curious things, we said that the animals, we didn't evolve out of the animals devolved out of us. That as we recapitulated earlier stages of consciousness, we left behind the forms of them, and they became the germinal forms for the families of animals, and the same thing with plants and such. All right. The Earth period had its own new element, and the new element for the Earth period is called Earth. But it doesn't mean Earth like soil, and it doesn't mean Earth like the planet. What it means is a finalized material objectivity. There are other kinds of objectivities. The highest forms of objectivity are in the transcendental spiritual worlds, but the element Earth represents a form or a material completion, a finalization, an objectification. It is an object, this is an objectification. So, it is the concrete completion. So it is as far as we can go with materialization and the production of the most sophisticated object that we can produce, which is our dense physical body. Now, there are curious things about this that it would be really lovely to go into, such as the fact that we have an objectivity that we can take something from the spiritual worlds and make an object of it, and everybody can look at that object and it stands for itself. Except when everybody looks at that object, they see it differently. So there is, in this kind of objectivity, there is also subjectivity. Very interesting thing to go into. Plato went into things like that. He was supposedly an initiate. Now, in the Earth period, another vehicle of consciousness, another body was added. That is to say, the Spirit has, with the help of the divine creative hierarchies, has manifested all of these vehicles to come into this world, to become aware of this world, and to reap this world and take the experience of it and carry it back into the Spirit. But there had to be something, there had to be a vehicle that wasn't just motivation. If you take a dog out, and that dog has been locked in a pen for a long time, which unfortunately some people do, and you let it loose in nature, it jumps here and it jumps there, and it jumps at everything that captures its attention. And that's what it is like to have a desire body without an intent and purpose. Whatever would capture our desire would capture our activity. So we had to have some reason, we had to do things for a reason. There's a reason that we're here to harvest the experience that we harvest. So, the reason comes with the introduction of a new vehicle. And ta-da! That new vehicle is the concrete mind, and it is at home in its own world in the concrete mind. And that indicates that the world, as far as completion is concerned, as far as concrete completion is concerned, everything is in standard position. The dense physical body is in the chemical subdivision of the physical world. The etheric body is in the etheric subdivision of the physical world. The desire body is in the desire world, and the concrete mind is in the concrete subdivision of the world of thought. So everything is in standard position, and that is another earth-like quality. It represents an objectivity of the bodies not being phased out or not being in their in their natural or their best state, because when the physical body was in the desire world, that wasn't home for it, and the best couldn't be brought out of it, and that wasn't what its purpose was for. So this was the completion of the personality. The personality is the personal thing, the, how would you say it, the entityized, that's not the right word, but it is the thing, it is the human thing. So it's known collectively as the personality, which is to differentiate it from the individuality. The individuality is the spiritual part. It is the part that uses the vehicles of consciousness. Now, the vehicles of consciousness do not have a real consciousness of their own. They have a dull, instinctual consciousness that there is something in the desire body or that is in the world of desire that is a primitive type of consciousness. But when we're conscious of our emotions, or if we stub our toe in the night and we're conscious of our physical body, it is not the physical body that's conscious. It is we, the spirits, that are conscious. So the individuality is the focus of a spiritual being that focuses through its perfectly developed personality in order to function in the concrete worlds, any one of the concrete worlds, but at this time most especially in the chemical subdivision of the physical world. All right, now we've talked about the finishing of the personality. Now we have to go back and start all over again. First, we have to state a very basic principle of cosmogony. And that principle is, it applies on every level. The principle is that material experience comes first, and corresponding spiritual development follows by reflection. Stated in a simple way, material experience first, meaning of spiritual experience afterward. So, what we're saying is that as a result of the concretization of the different bodies, those experiences reflect back into this becoming spiritual entity. And that's what we want to review now very quickly. Now, in our mineral-like stage in the Saturn period, we were learning to take form. And the divine hierarchies tried to radiate form into us, even the simplest form of a little tiny spheroid. And it was analogous to the way that our current minerals are being formed, but it is much more sophisticated now. Now, the minerals, as we try to work with them now and make something of them or bring experience to them, they resist. And we resisted in the Saturn period. And we echoed back what was being emanated to us by the gods. And in that, it didn't take. It took a lot of effort for a long time, but finally we did take form. Or most did, some didn't ever. But that's another subject that's way out of the way for tonight. Now, according to what we're saying, material experience results in spiritual consciousness. This ability to take form is very valuable. We need the minerals right now. If we didn't have the mineral kingdom and its willingness to take and hold form, even if it resists, our bodies would puddle away into some amorphous form. It's because of that formability, that resistance of the minerals, that we are able to take form. So, the same thing was true in the Saturn period. Our resistance to taking form reflected into the spirit to awaken the power of will. And the power of will is, how can you say it? In its purest sense, is irrefragable. You can't break the will at all. So, out of the experience of material taking form or resisting taking form, but finally doing so, we developed the power of will, which is the will to be. The will to be at all, which exists now for eternity. And so out of these little experiences of taking form, something immortal in the deepest sense of the word was developed. Now in the Sun period, something similar happened. We went through a plant-like existence. We had vitality. We lived. And with vitality, we could grow, just like our plants now grow. And we could take different shapes. And this experience reflected into the transcendental spiritual worlds. And it awakened the life spirit. The life spirit is sometimes called the true imagination or the pure imagination. It is not just an imagining. It doesn't produce little imaginations. It is the power to imagine at all. It corresponds to the vital life. The vital life can take many forms. In our plant kingdom now, all sorts of, out of the same vitality, all sorts of different forms have been developed. And that basic vitalness of being able to take multiple forms awakened that pure imagination to take any form. And the vitality that we experienced awakened the liveliness of the spirit, and hence its name, the life spirit. Now, not only are the attributes of the spirit reflections of bodies and somatic experience in the concrete worlds, their association with each other it comes through the association of the vehicles in the concrete world. So we know that plants grow in minerals, and plants specialize minerals, so they are tied together. Similarly, when this is reflected into the spiritual worlds, the life spirit is tied together with the divine spirit. So we then have a twofold spirit at the end of the Sun period, and that develops and it assimilates and goes as far as it can in the rest between the Sun period and the Moon period. Now, we have said that in the Moon period we went through an animal-like evolution. And in this animal-like evolution, we had the ability to move around. Now, plants can grow, but they're still effectively, no matter what kind of plant, even an algae, is rooted. It isn't like moving, like a dog running or something like that. So, in order to have the ability to move about, we had to have the motivation. And the motivation had to have a discrete body that was separated within the creation and not attached in a rooted way the way the plants are. So we have animals as autonomous creatures. And this autonomy also gets reflected into the spirit. It gets reflected into the abstract subdivision of the world of thought. And in there, it forms an extremely important idea. And that is the idea of a being. And independent, as much independent as you can be in spirit, everything is connected in spirit, but an individual spiritual being is what developed out of the animal-like spirit experience of the Moon period. So, in the same way that no animal can live without directly getting life from plants, no animal or no human being can exist without vitality. Well, some human beings who are very, very advanced can get vitality out of the ethers, out of the sunlight itself, but ordinary human beings like ourselves, we need the plant kingdom, and the animals need the plant kingdom. So there is a symbiosis. There is a necessary connection between the animals and the plants, just as there is between the plants and the minerals. So everything, I suppose if you wanted to put it in technical psychological terms, I don't like the term, but you could say that everything is codependent. I would like to say that everything is necessarily cooperative, would probably be a better way of saying it, but that's not the words that the world uses. All right, so we have a threefold spirit, and we have a fourfold personality. This threefold spirit is creatively potent. It is a God with a small g. And it is active creatively, but not self-consciously. Other divine beings use this unconscious spiritual entity for creative work. The best example is given in the book of Genesis, where it says, Adam named the animals. What is meant to say is that what the animals are now were emanations that came out of humans as we evolved, but in the naming of them, we created a form. But we didn't create them in the same way that we make a clay model or something like that. We created it as an agency for the divine beings who were developing the animals and who were going to be guiding them and producing their evolution. So we were divinely creative beings before we even knew we had a self. The self was created in the moon period, but it wasn't a self. It was a threefold spiritual entity with spiritual powers, but without waking consciousness. And that brings us to the end of the moon period. I'm sure this is one of those reviews that may be a little different from the way it was said in the first place. It's one of my idiosyncrasies, which is both positive and negative, that I can't say the same thing twice the same way. I have to say it in a different way. There's something in me that rebels against exact duplication. And that's, for teaching, that's not always a good thing. If you're a teacher, you have to be able to pronounce a word exactly the same way every time. All right. Now, we've seen in the past that each personal new vehicle of consciousness, how to say it, in each period, we built a new vehicle of consciousness, say it as simple as possible. In the Saturn period, we built the physical, the moon, sun period, the vital, the moon, the desire, and in the earth period, we built the mind. Now, this means that with each new vehicle, there had to be accommodation. And we've talked about that a little bit tonight. We said as soon as we had an etheric body to produce flexibility and growth and things like that, the physical body had to become more permeable. It had to become more adaptable. It had to be more usable in the evolutionary work. Now that's just the beginning. Each body, the physical body became capable of more things, and with each body it became more complex. But we remember that in this whole process, everything is looking forward to now when we are harvesting the physical world. The physical world is the ultimate frontier for this solar cosmos. It is the ultimate frontier for us. And in a strange way, it is a congealment of our ignorance. Or better said, it is a congealment of the unknown. That is, we project what we know as a dream into the unknown, and does it take or does it change the unknown? Yes and no. The unknown part is unchanged, and in this interaction, the unknown becomes known. We know about something, we know something that we never knew before, that has never been in any other manifestation. The newness isn't just for us. The newness is for God, for the universal spirit. It's impossible that we should learn new things and there'd be a completely new evolution without the universal spirit itself evolving. So what we're doing when we are interacting with the physical world, even if we're just hammering on a stone, we are bringing in something new, some experience that has never been before. So, with the addition of each new vehicle, the previous vehicles become more supple and more responsive to the higher vehicles. But that's not all, because in this world we need to take in food, because that's where our greatest alchemical work is. We take minerals that have been transformed by the plants, we take them into our body, and our consciousness gets shared with those minerals. They become part of us, and then we excrete them. That's a big alchemical work. So even if a person is in suspended animation in some kind of a coma or trance or something like that, they're still helping the evolution. They're still alchemizing through the work that is being done through their bodies. But at any rate, in this world, we have to have food to bring the substances of the external world into us so that we can alchemize them and then put them out. We need them for our very existence. This means that we had to have a digestive system. And when we have a body that moves, we had to have a muscular system. And then we had to have a nervous system in order to innervate the muscular system to get something done. So at each period, as we developed a new body, that thing that began as that little spheroid, that little berry, in the Saturn period takes on more and more sophistication. But the sophistication is germinal. It isn't completely carried out yet. And it isn't completely carried out until the physical world. So we went into this when we went into detail. We talked about how the different systems of the physical bodies as it is now, how they were developed in past periods and why they were developed in, okay, now we have that. Now, we're in the Earth period and we have the mind. So the physical body had to be it had to be changed. It had to be reformed in order for the mind to function in the physical body. And that brought about a very recent evolution, that is the brain. And that, the most recent part, is the frontal part of the brain. The brain, back around the brain stem, the animal brain you might call, which I think some people like now call it the reptilian brain or something like that. But the brain, in order to think and to bring the sense material all the way back so that thoughts can be formed about it. Even a simple thought, like an animal, like a rabbit, it sees a coyote that's coming after it and it responds and it runs away, but it isn't a matter of thought. It's a matter of impulse. The thought behind it is with the group spirit that guides the little bunny and says, hey, I wanted you to live, so I'm going to keep you running away from this coyote. All right. So the brain was developed to be able to respond and to carry out thoughts from the concrete mind. Okay. So this is something. The concrete mind, even so, though some pedants would like to think that is the ultimate of evolution, is still just a tool. The concrete mind, in a spiritual sense, is really important. It is like a lens. It is like it's a link, and it's like a bride that looks for the groom, and the groom is the spirit. So the importance of the concrete mind is that it gives us a linked vehicle all the way from the dense physical body to the divine spirit. That is what the link of the mind is. But it is really important as a lens, because as a lens, the truth knower, that is the spirit that is capable of knowing the truth. And just as earlier we said that if you stub your toe, it is the spirit that understands what has taken place. Yeah, you feel it through the desire body and all of that, but the knowing comes from the spirit. So the linked being from the dense physical world to the divine spirit is a complete human being. But that's only just the beginning. It is the mind as a lens that is really important. Because as a lens, the spirit can not only see into its vehicles, it can begin to enter into them. And this is an enormous spiritual development. Like we have these little toys. They have these little cars with remote controls that kids have, and adults like to play with them too. And they get these cars to do various things, and it's quite remarkable. There are remote control airplanes and things like that. You do wonderful things with them. But it's not the same thing as being inside a car and driving. Because being inside a car and driving, you have a sense of control that everything is available to you, not just the things that are programmed according to the remote control. Everything's available to you. You can notice a sound that says, oops, that brake is squeaking, I might need a new brake job. Things like that. So being within the vehicles is all important. And so our work is not to eschew the physical world as some spiritual philosophies believe, but to come completely into the physical world without being attached to it. Because if you're attached to it psychologically, you see things with a personalized subjectivity and you don't get the most out of the world. But if you have an impersonal detachment from the physical world and you function in it, then you're serving God. You're experiencing things and you're taking those experiences and you're bringing them to the Spirit through your self-consciousness. That's a wonderful, wonderful thing. But something else takes place when this happens. When we enter our vehicles, we awaken self-consciousness. That self that heretofore was a divinity and that had divine creative powers was not aware of it. It was not, and on top of that, what we did for the gods, so to speak, or what we do for the universal spirit was not of the best consciousness. The best consciousness is to be completely aware of what you're doing and of your doing of it. So our self-consciousness, when we awaken self-consciousness, reflects into the divinity both in microcosm and macrocosm. And at this time of the night, I'm tired already and I can't say it strongly enough, but this is of supreme importance. Self-consciousness is of supreme importance, provided we don't contaminate it with egoism or things like that, but those are all subjects for some later talks from now. So, as we enter our vehicles, we become self-conscious. We have a really good example from history. We have René Descartes, who had a true awakening of self in what would be called the baptism by the Holy Spirit with some, but he had it with complete rationality. He said, I think, therefore I am, therefore I think I am. Very important two-phrase statement. In the process of thinking, he realized that he was the thinker. He was the one that was utilizing and moving the body. But when he realized that, he said, I think, therefore I think I am. That he rationalized his personality to thinking. That's an extremely important thing. And this applies not only to the concrete mind, it applies to all of our spiritual vehicles or our vehicles of consciousness. If we are aware of our desires and emotions, and if we use them creatively in the same way that we creatively produce thoughts, the same thing is true if we become completely self-consciously aware of our etheric bodies and what we do in them with life. It's quite wonderful. And finally, when we become completely self-conscious of our physical existence without getting trapped into being locked in the personality, in the physical personality, we've gone as far as we can go with self-consciousness. All right. When we are aware in the different vehicles, we awaken our divinity by applying it. And we apply it with creativity. And when we apply it with creativity, we evolve and the things that we work with evolve. Suppose someone is a painter and is making an oil painting. It could be figurative or it can be abstract, but suppose it's representational, and it is a portrait of somebody wearing some bright clothing. In order, you have a few basic oils, and out of them you have to produce many, many colors. And when you do that, you're evolving your senses because you're seeing. And when you do that, you're coming to an understanding of color. And when you do that, you're coming to an understanding of the stuff that you're painting with. And when you do that, you're actually bringing creative consciousness to the mineral stuff that is in those paints. Now that is an example of what we're doing in our everyday life. Now unfortunately, our self-consciousness is very minimal, mineral too. And it is, we can't take, because the world is what it is, we can't deliberate everything we do every second of the day, or we never get anything done. But eventually our consciousness and concentration expands, and we become more intent, and we become more intentional. And we do wake up, and we do create, and we help all of the beings around us. If we think about machines and the relationship of animals to machines, if we take that knowledge and think about it, that thinking gets carried to the spirits that guide the animals. And even though there are terrible things like collisions with cars and things like that, there is evolution that takes place, that because of us, that we're getting this to the tutelary spirits of the different animal species. All right, I don't want to prolong this too long. It's been pretty long already. I didn't even know what time we started at. Now this is as far as we're going to go with the talk for this evening. This is a review, and this brings us down to where we are now at this time in the evolutionary creation. And from this very point of the concrete mind being focused through the vehicles into the various worlds in which we participate is where we are going to begin in the next talk next month. Thank you very much. I hope you got some benefit out of this, and I hope it improves your understanding of the wonderful creative reality that we are part of. All right. Thank you.